welcome you to the second webinar of our tech series. Last time around, we spoke about the benefits of an automated CI/CD pipeline on Google Cloud Platform and showed you how you can deploy it on GCP through a demo, right? This time, we are covering another tool chain in the configuration process within DevOps automation, which is infrastructure as code, right? The reason why we chose infrastructure as code for today's session is it has to be a key attribute of enabling best practices in DevOps, right? It is intended to reduce the complexity that kills efficiency out of any manual configuration, right? And more often than not, IAC tools are included as components of a DevOps tool chain, right? Yeah, so before we actually move on to the main topic and the agenda, let me begin with a quick introduction about Sears. We are a niche cloud engineering business that was born in the cloud. In fact, we've been a technology-led business transformation company for the last 16 years, driven by the idea of driving technology-led business transformation. We are now one of the top cloud and analytics solutions and engineering company in APAC, Europe, and the United States. We work with organizations in multiple geographies and specialize in infrastructure and application modernization, data management, and data engineering implementations. We are also a premier partner with Google Cloud and work very closely with them on a number of various projects and customer engagements. Next slide. We have a footprint in 14 locations across the globe with over 3,000 customers, over 300 engineers, having over 150 professional and associate level Google Cloud certifications. Right? We cover all of the major verticals and provide highly tailored solutions based on the client's use case or problem area. Right? Next slide, please. So the hosts for this session are Prakhar Gautam from Google and Karan Kaushik from Sears. Prakhar is a solutions architect with Google Cloud. In this role, he helps firms design cloud scale solutions for high performance, scale, and resilience. Prior to Google, Prakhar also donned various roles from a developer to an architect to a consultant at large firms like Deloitte, Cognizant, and other noteworthy organizations. Right? Karan from Sears is a solutions architect, also a DevOps specialist at Sears. Karan is a certified professional Google Cloud architect with an experience of automating infrastructure deployments and monitoring for customers on Google Cloud Platform. Next slide. Yeah, so today what we'll try to cover is to start with some challenges that enterprises face in the DevOps in their DevOps practice and how automation through infrastructure as code helps them. Then we'll talk about some of the widely and commonly used IAC tools and what are they meant for, which use cases are they solving, right? We'll then also do a deep dive. We'll magnify specifically into Terraform and Ansible and talk about our own experience of working with these tools. And lastly, Karan is going to run us through live demos where he'll show you how to actually automate deployments using Terraform. Right? With that, I'd like to hand it over to Prakhar, who will take us through the importance of automating infrastructure and what are the benefits of it. Right? Over to you, Prakhar.
All right, thank you so much, Karthik, and thank you so much for having me over. So before getting into what is infrastructure as a code, let's first understand what is even the need of expressing your resources as a code, right? So if let's say you don't do it today, then it may seem like a wacky idea as to something that you're easily able to do through UI. Why somebody professing that you should actually script all of that into some sort of a Terraform or Ansible kind of a code, right? So to understand the motivations behind doing something like that, we need to go back to how things used to happen traditionally in a data center environment. So where, let's say, if you were to deploy a resource, let's say an application server, then the developers or the testers would essentially raise a provisioning request, which would then be picked up by a central team by deploying a hardened virtual or a physical server. Now, with the advent of cloud computing, all of this fundamentally changes, right? So now using cloud computing, you can pretty much self-provision the resources as you need. So you can create virtual machines, you can create databases, networks, load balancers, and so on the fly. Next slide, please. So now, while all of that is great from a rapid, flexible deployment of resources point of view, it gives you a lot of freedom, but it also gives rise to a lot of other problems. And so ideally, in any organization, there are different environments reserved for different needs. So for example, if you're a developer, you would have a sandbox environment curated towards faster development. If you are on the testing or the QA side, then you would be working on a copy of a production environment, hopefully, to run your test cases. And if you are running a staging environment, then your primary focus would be PSR, right? So on the lines of performance, scalability, reliability, and so on. Next slide. So things get complicated when there are different teams involved. For example, any large organization or even mid-sized organization can have multiple different departments, right? Each department can have its own development, test staging kind of environments. Now, if you were to manage a large environment manually, good luck with that. But it's hard to map which resources belong to who, right? So when you raise or when you expand to any scale on cloud environment, right? So it becomes very, very difficult to actually tag which resource belongs to who. It and even more so, it becomes extremely complex to make any changes to the environment whatsoever. So if you are managing any kind of environment manually, then probably these kind of questions will resonate with you. For example, what happens if I add or delete a firewall policy in the network? Right? Will it lead to a server that I don't even know exists being unreachable somewhere? Or what happens if I were to add or delete an IAM rule in a policy? Will it result in a resource being exposed on the internet that I'm not aware of? Right? Next slide, please. So as the environment expands over time, it can be extremely challenging to tell what has been provisioned or deployed. Also now, when we're talking in the realms of cloud, this can be a huge cost issue as well. So if you ever hunted through multiple accounts using multiple services in different regions, then you can understand how massive this problem can be. With your unmanaged environments, the cost saving alone can make looking at an alternative a worthwhile investment. So to summarize what I've been talking about, maintaining and managing any kind of complex environment on cloud or otherwise is extremely complex, and doing it manually just does not scale. Next slide, please. So this is really where infrastructure as code comes in. What it does is it allows you to track each resource addition, deletion, modification request with a clear, concise, and programmatic process. So think of it like you are using code to represent each of your resource and its metadata. It allows your infrastructure to be instantiated in an automated fashion, making it easy to build multiple environments. Now, it's important, and I would like to highlight this, it's important to understand that infrastructure as code operates at two levels. One, where you automate infrastructure provisioning. For example, let's say you might need to create a /24 private subnet. And once that is done, you would like to set up firewall rules so as to allow only a few ports to be open. For example, let's say you want to shut down any SSH advents in your /24 network. So you're shutting down essentially only 22, you're shutting down port 22 and you're only opening up, let's say 3306 for MySQL, right? Once all of that is done, then you want to progress and you want to create, let's say a 16 core, 32 gig virtual machine, right? 32 gig RAM virtual machine, which needs to be running a Debian operating system, right? And then you have to create IAM policies that only allow users belonging to a particular team, let's say a development team, to have access to this machine. Now, all of that is done using tools like Terraform, which is open source and primary topic of today's discussion. The second part of automation is what's really running inside the machine. So Part one, we just looked at how do we provision the machine, where is it sitting, what are the kind of firewall rules, IAM policies, so on and so forth, blocking access back and forth from this machine. Now, when you have a machine up and running, what exactly do you want? Um, what exactly do you want to be running on the machine itself, right? So, for example, you may want to install a database or application server like a Tomcat or WebLogic running on top of it. That's where tools like Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Salt, etc. come into play. So just to iterate, just to make sure that you take home the point that Terraform allows you to set up things like VPC, subnets, route tables, security groups, DNS, load balancers, so on and so forth. Basically, anything that is part of the environment in your cloud or private, in your public cloud or private cloud infrastructure. And with tools like Chef, Puppet, Ansible, you're setting up applications, service mounts, anything you need to configure on the machine itself. Right? Next slide. So hopefully the last slide gave you some flavor of what really infrastructure as a code will allow you to do. But let's double click on some of the benefits that you can get out of actually expressing your resources as a code. Now, if you actually talk to folks who have deployed IAC infrastructure as a code or even read about this online, you would find a lot of mention of things like versioning and automation. Now, I just want to clarify that versioning and automations are just the features of IAC, not really the reasons why you would want to do it, right? So go back to the first thing that we really talked about. Is it safe for you to remove, let's say, an environment variable that is running in your infrastructure? Why was this flag set in the first place? Or, for example, how did a configuration file get to the state that it is in currently? Who added that side to the server, right? So all these questions with infrastructure as a code, you can actually look back at your IAC scripts to find out answer to all these questions. And let's say, a change breaks your environment, which usually happens quite a lot. Well, you can just roll it back, just like you would for any code release, right? That's the kind of power that IAC brings to the fore. Now, also, many times in regulated industries where you will need to be able to audit both changes as well as access to the environment, IAC actually simplifies this by allowing someone without access to a production environment to make changes to your IAC scripts and then hand them off to someone with access who can actually apply changes in a controlled environment like a production environment. So for anyone who has had to manage a process like this, you can understand how complicated this can be if you are not using automation to manage these things. Also, I want to call this out separately, being able to tell when something was changed and who made that change and who has access to what is critical for your security of your environment, being able to see the history of changes to your security groups, firewall rules, so on and so forth, along with commit messages can do wonders for being confident about the security configuration of your environment. So IAC actually unlocks a lot of these security auditing related benefits to you. Finally, I'm quite certain a majority of, or at least some of the folks in the audiences will be running or planning to run multi-cloud or hybrid cloud environments, which are now a reality, right? So having been in this space for a long time, I totally understand that migrations are one of the most expensive as well as risky propositions that organizations can undertake. IC tools IC tools like Terraform can actually allow moving between platforms easier, since translating a Terraform script from one cloud vendor to another is considerably simpler than having to recreate your entire environment from scratch using UI or CLI. Now, the visibility that your IAC scripts will provide to you into what is provisioned and therefore what needs to be converted when you're actually undertaking a migration exercise is worth its weight in gold if you are considering this kind of a switch. So it allows you to be interoperable across various environments. Now, I hope I've given you enough food for thought if you're still contemplating whether you really need to introduce IAC in your environment or not. But having said that, I fully appreciate that learning something like Terraform or Ansible can be a steep learning curve. For example, for things that were easily created from UI or CLI, we are asking you to write scripts, right? So among a seasoned ops team, this can be one of the biggest obstacles to ISE adoption. But all the benefits that we talked about, think about all the benefits that we talked about, things like interoperability, ease of migration and deployment, cost controls, auditability, ease of troubleshooting and repeatability, so on and so forth. All of them will make the investments worthwhile eventually. And as for lowering the curve of adoption, that's where our wonderful partners like Sears can really make it easy for you. Right. With that, I've given you a brief overview of Terraform so that CS team can take it away as far as deep diving into the topic is concerned. But I really appreciate you taking the time to tune in today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. Back to the CS team.
Thanks a lot, Prakhar, for that lovely introduction into Terraform and IAC as a general thing. So moving or carrying it on forward. So here are some of the tools that are generally used or something, or maybe if you just do a Google search of exactly IAC tools. So these are something that usually pop up. So out of that, the most used or the most famous tool that almost all the companies try to employ would be Terraform. Along with that, we also have Ansible, SaltStack, Puppet, and Chef, and GCP's own cloud deployment manager. So just to give a brief, like Prakhar had already given before, Ansible, Salt, Puppet, and Chef. So these tools actually belong to the configuration management scenario. So they actually come from there, like managing everything on your servers. That is something that these tools are actually, master of. But as being said, or learning a new language might not always be in someone's bucket list, and people might want to develop on what they already know. So that's why all of these languages also provide an additional step of provisioning the infrastructure. But the problem with that is we are trying to use something that was made for configuration management to provision infrastructure. So that can lead to problems, maybe not as soon as you start using it, but eventually it can lead to problems where you're managing overhead a lot more than you probably would have if you have used a provisioning tool from the very start. So coming back to Terraform regarding that, Terraform was actually built by HashiCorp in 2014. With the main concept being that Terraform should be an open model so that people can contribute, as well as different cloud providers can provide their own modules, so that provisioning or writing Terraform code for various cloud models, as Prakhar said, in a hybrid model is really important. So that should not be a problem anymore. Terraform is basically a repeatable task without any risk, because whenever you are planning to make any changes from Terraform, it gives out a proper state definition of exactly what changes will be applied after you have changed that one minute configuration in your variable file. Also, it's a self-service infrastructure, which means that entire infrastructure that is being provisioned by you guys is absolutely in your control, and whatever changes you make will not go ahead unless it is approved by someone with the correct access. Also, it is infrastructure as a code tool, which is being adopted, which has already been adopted by many organizations and corporations, and it is also getting adopted by other people, and some people just like to play with it and add modules to it. Okay, so how Terraform works is basically you have a .tf file where you can define your entire state. So if you can just notice over here, we have the resource Google project. That means I want to create a resource in the Google project. I want to create a Google project resource basically, and I just give my definition over here. That the name should be work project, parent should be Google folder, and the region should be US Central 1. Okay, and subsequently I also want subnets in this particular project as well. So I provide the different details for that. So what is the name of my subnet, which project needs to belong to, what's the region for it, and what's the CIDR range for it. After defining the said file, Terraform has really simple commands that enables us to, basically plan out. So Terraform plan is basically, it gives you an entire deep dive into exactly what resource you have defined, what all configurations would go behind the resource. Because just defining these 3 items does not mean that the resource can be made out of these 3 items itself. After clicking on Terraform deploy, you get an entire list of items that, okay, these are all the configuration items that will be applied, that will be applied to your particular resource, whether you have defined them or not. So Terraform has some default values which can come really handy when you're not sure exactly what to define. And lastly, Terraform apply. So Terraform apply is a straightforward apply that asks for an additional input of whether this particular state needs to be applied or not. But that can also be automated since Terraform has an option for that. So applying a Terraform state that is, good to go is a direct task and can be automated via any of the automation tools like CloudBuild or Jenkins, whichever you're comfortable with. So after applying this particular item, all of your resources are basically get provisioned on GCP, and you can see them getting provisioned also. At the same time, Terraform gives a proper output if that has been defined, that these are the resources that are getting provisioned, as well as these are what are in running state, and a few additional items that you might have defined in your output.tf file. Okay, now coming down to Ansible. Okay, so as we mentioned, the Terraform and Ansible are usually a few of the tools that are properly used by major companies or individuals. So Ansible is a tool that would help you automate different tasks to achieve a desired state. Okay, so this might sound a lot like Terraform only, but the major difference is being Terraform is an infrastructure provisioning tool. Ansible is a configuration management tool. So although you can provision your infrastructure using Ansible, but it can lead to certain problems, maybe not immediately, but can lead to problems in the future. Just as a small example, you can provision a server using Terraform and a server using Ansible. But in the event that you might need to add more servers to your entire bucket, like if you want to increase your server count from 1 to let's say 5, you can make that simple change directly in Terraform, where you can define that, okay, I need 5 servers instead of 1, and Terraform would only add additional 4 servers. Whereas for Ansible, if you change the definition from 1 to 5, Ansible would assume that you want 5 more servers. So in the end, you end up with getting 6 servers instead of the original 5 that you had desired. So that is one of the shortcomings when you probably use Ansible Ansible for provisioning infrastructure. Okay, so basic concept of Ansible for someone who is not used or is not familiar with it. Ansible has these 3 main concepts. So one is an inventory file. So that is where you define the different host or the different servers on which your state change should be applied. Then you have Ansible task. So these are small actions that Ansible will execute. And then you have the Ansible playbook. So this is basically a file, you can say a state file of basically what needs to be applied on the servers. Okay, so moving forward, yeah. So this is the basic structure of how an Ansible file would look like. So you design how your infrastructure should look like. You write the Ansible code to support that. You also write infrastructure templates. So these can be Jinja 2 templates or Python templates that you might write. And combining those, both of those items, you actually deploy the infrastructure. And depending upon what is the state change, or is it the desired state or not, you go back to the design board and repeat the process again. So Terraform follows a similar kind of ISE workflow, but it's just much simpler since it's a what can I say? It's the language HCL is written in. It's pretty descriptive and pretty straightforward to read through also. Okay, so moving on to demos. So a few of the demos that we have planned for today is how we can create a custom IAM role and service account on Terraform. It's using Terraform onto GCP. Okay, then we proceed to create VPC and subnets within GCP only, and attaching a cloud NAT to it, so that the VM that we provision right after that can actually talk to the internet, and maybe we can download a few items on it. Apart from that, we'll also be touching base with few of the managed services such as Cloud SQL. So Cloud SQL is an offering from Google where you can provision relational databases such as MySQL, Postgres, or MySQL Server. SQL Server. Also, we'll try to provision another managed service from Google, that is Dataproc. So Dataproc is Google's one of Google's big data offering a managed service where you can run your entire Spark workload or Hadoop workload directly on managed servers, where you don't have to worry about what kind of software is getting installed or what needs to be present on the server. You just need to upload your jar or upload your work file and just start running it and processing the data that is incoming from various sources. Okay, so I'll just share my screen regarding the Terraform code that we have. Okay. Yeah, I hope my screen is visible to you guys. Okay,
Yes,
so yeah, so over here at CS, we follow a particular structure of how we want to keep our Terraform code. So if you can see, we have 3 different directories. One is global. So in global, basically, you would want to keep all of the resources that that come at a global scale. So it could be GCS buckets, could be IAM roles. Since VPC is a global entity in GCP, so VPC and subnets are also kept within the same global directory. Then you have regions. So one of the major reason we wanted to segregate regions is so that if you are creating if your project or if your project requirement has you creating multiple resources in different regions, such as maybe US Central 1 or maybe somewhere in Europe or in Asia Pacific. So you should not get confused as to what resources actually kept in which region. So in that manner, if you segregate those region wise, you already know that, okay, I have 5 VMs running in US, I have my database running in US, but I have my storage bucket set in Europe because I can't take my data out from there. So that kind of thing is something that comes in really handy. It also helps in managing everything properly so that you don't get confused as to what is happening in which region or what is getting provisioned where. Lastly, we come down to the modules directory. So modules directory is basically where we keep our entire Terraform calling modules. So these contain all the different resource definition that we have. For example, if I just jump into Compute Engine real quick, okay? So I'll just showcase the main.terraform file. So over here, you can see that we are calling the data module from Google Compute Engine for the Ubuntu image, so that we can actually leverage the 1804 image over here. Similarly, you can see over here that we are trying to incorporate the resource Google Compute instance. We're giving it a name GCEVM and trying to use that in its entirety. So the reason we have done that is so that these modules can be reused multiple times instead of us having to define a resource every time we want to create a new VM. So that is one of the best practices that you can follow, is that whatever resources or whatever resource definition are actually getting called multiple times, or you feel that they might be reusable. So it's a general good practice to just keep them separately in a modules directly, and then have another directory from where you can call those particular modules. Okay, so jumping down to the demo that we have set up. So firstly, in IAM, okay. So firstly, there might be multiple people who will be working on Terraform, trying to set up the infrastructure that you have. Okay, so storing your Terraform state file in a Git repository would not be generally a good idea. Storing your state file in something like a GCS bucket or an S3 bucket would be a general good practice, because how it would work is whenever someone is implementing a Terraform state change or a Terraform apply or a destroy, so that particular state file would get locked. So how that would proceed is, if 2 people are working on the same file or are working on the same, let's say, same resource and are trying to change that. So instead of both of them running into a race condition, what would happen is, since the Terraform file has already been locked by the first person who had executed the file, the second one would have to wait and would get a proper error that state changes are still under process, and the file that you're trying to access has a lock on it. So please take the steps accordingly. So that way you can actually protect from people running into a race condition and leading into problems. So okay, so one of the first things that I did just before the demo was to actually create a storage bucket in Google Cloud. Okay, so the bucket name is pretty simple. It's prod TF state US Central 1. So I just added the region name to the bucket as a general best practice. And just to signify that it's for the production environment, and this is holding all of my Terraform state over here. Okay, So coming down to IAM, let me just bring this also over here. Yeah. Okay. So if you can see the bucket name over here clearly. So it's prod TF state US Central 1. So prod indicates the environment I'm working for. TF state would indicate that this bucket is only used to store different Terraform states on which I'm working. And US Central 1 is just to denote that which region or which location my bucket is actually created in. Okay. Let's see. So we'll move to IAM. All right. So we'll move to IAM. We'll move to service accounts. So you can see that there are multiple files already present over here. So a general best practice is do not execute anything from your machine directly unless you are just testing it out in your own personal environment or a sandbox environment. Okay, because executing from your machine means that whatever state is created, it is present only on your own personal workstation and it is not shared with everyone in a bucket like I just mentioned. Not being shared with everyone can lead to a problem that people might introduce many changes and whatever resource that you might have created or infrastructure you might have created would look pretty differently when you come back to it again. Okay. All right. So here we have some resource definitions for service account basically. So as I had mentioned earlier, in the modules directory that we have, we keep the service accounts in the IAM folder, so that no one has a problem getting to those. All right. So these are basically reusable modules. Okay. So we'll just call them called modules or main modules, as you can see. And over here, what we have is the calling module. So these modules are the ones that actually call the modules that we have, the main module basically. Okay. So you can see that for each Terraform service account, we use 3 different modules over here. So one of them is the custom role, so that whenever a service account is created, we create a custom role accordingly with it. Okay. So we mention the source that, okay, in my main modules, please go to the custom role main module. Then we have a service account definition that, okay, please go into the service account new. That is, I want to create a new service account. So please visit that and use that as a source for your provisioning. And lastly, we have the member roles. So what this would do is it would add an IAM member. So as soon as my service account is created, it would attach the custom role that we also created along with it, and add my service account into the IAM members. So I'll just execute this so that you guys can know how the things are working out. Okay. So I guess I'm in the wrong directory. Let me just change that. Okay. IAM service account. Okay, so the very first item that you need to do is, if you're like me and you run multiple test scenarios, you probably need to delete your .terraform directory. So what this has is it basically stores modules that are needed for your Terraform code provisioning. The first thing you need to do is perform a Terraform init. Okay, so what Terraform init does is So what Terraform init does is basically reads what modules you have defined. It tries to fetch all of those modules from the source and basically downloads all the provider plugins that are required. So in this case, we require the Google HashiCorp plugins because we need to provision IAMs onto Google Cloud. And after initialization, you get this particular successful message that, initialization has been, the Terraform has been successfully initialized. So we can move on to our next step, which is Terraform plan. Okay, so Terraform plan, what it does is gives you a proper picture of what resources are getting created, what are the different values that are maybe getting applied to it. So you might be wondering, okay, exactly where are these permissions coming from, right? So in Terraform, you have the particular file terraform.tfas. So this is where you define all of your different variables that you want your actual module to use. So if I come back over here, you can see that this particular custom role module has a variable defined project ID. So that same variable is being used. That same variable is present over here, project ID. So this is my project ID, GCP Terraform demo project. Okay. The next variable that we have is service account Terraform demo SA role name. So this might look a little confusing at first, but if you can just drill down and just step by step go onto it. So this is a service account. This is the role name for it. So this is the role name. So this is the custom role name with which the role would be created. I'll just show that to you on the console itself after we have created the said the set service account. And lastly, we have the permissions for that particular custom role. So that is again within the variable Terraform demo SA with the permissions item. So you can see there are multiple permissions defined over here. Okay. So similarly, I'm actually creating another service account. This is for Dataproc, which we will be covering in the coming demos. Okay. So you can just basically verify that okay, one of my custom role is getting created. This is the name for the custom role. These are the permissions associated with it. This is the project in which it is getting created, the role ID for it, the title for it, and also the stage for it. Okay, the stage for a role is particular GA, which is general availability, so that your role is generally available for usage properly. Similarly, you can see that the demo service account that we wanted to create, it also displays the information likewise. Okay. So moving forward, we'll just apply these changes. The command for that is pretty simple: Terraform apply.
I have a question.
Sorry, sir, can I request you to put that question in the chat?
Okay.
Okay. So as you can see, Terraform apply actually gives out the entire plan in a similar fashion as Terraform plan did. It also tells you that okay, 6 of the resources are to be added, out of which there are 0 to change and 0 to be destroyed. Okay, so it's pretty simple to actually notice how Terraform changes are actually what Terraform changes are actually going to do. So a create resource would be highlighted in green with a plus sign. A change would be highlighted in a tilde. Okay, a change would be highlighted in a tilde, and whatever you want to delete would be highlighted in a hyphen with a red sign. So when we go on to deletion of the Terraform resources, you will be able to see all of those changes as well. Okay, so if you are happy with whatever changes Terraform is going to make, you just enter a value of yes over here, and Terraform would start provisioning all of those resources for you. Okay, so usually provisioning can take up to some time depending upon what kind of resource you're trying to provision. Since we are trying to provision a simple resource such as IAM roles and service account, the process would not last longer than maybe 30 to 50 seconds. And after that, we'll have our resources ready to be viewed on the console also. So I'll just move to the console in the meanwhile. Okay, so if you can go to IAM, firstly, we'll look into the roles that have been created. Okay, so you can see that the 2 roles that we wanted to create, Terraform demo SA role and the Dataproc demo SA role. So those have been created along with the same permissions that we had provided to them in the variable file. Okay, so you can see that the permissions over here are also the same. Okay, moving down to the service accounts that we had created. So we'll also have 2 service accounts with similar names. As you can see over here, Dataproc demo SA and the Terraform demo SA. Also, we had an additional module, if you can recall over here. Okay, so we had a custom account module, custom role module, which you can see the roles have been created. We had a custom service account module. You can see the service account also created. And we have this additional member IAM module. So what this does is basically add those service account to your main IAM console also. So if you can see in the IAM members list, you'll be, okay, sorry about that. Yeah, if you open the main IAM console list, you'll be able to see those 2 service accounts ready over here. You can see the Terraform demo SA account as well as the Dataproc demo SA account. Okay, coming back to the demo regarding this. Okay, so we have created our service accounts. The next thing that we need is networking basically. Because without networks, we will not be able to provision any kind of VM or resource because they would not mean they would not carry any particular definitive value. Okay, so over here you can see that we have 4 main calling modules. So we have VPC and subnets. So I'll just go over that real quickly. Okay, so you can see, so this is the definition for VPC that we have. Okay, so what this is trying to tell us is that the source for this module, that what all kind of resource definition of our VPC would be defined, is in this particular source directory. So this is the main module for VPC. Similarly, we have a main module for subnets as well. Okay, Apart from that, we have a few common variables such as project ID or VPC name, then routing mode and description if you want to add a description to your VPC. And for subnets, you have what kind of subnets needs to be defined and if there is a secondary range with that subnet, because some resources might require a secondary range within your subnet itself. So even if you want to provision that, that is an option that we have. Okay, then moving on to the variables that we need to define over here. So as you can see, the VPC name given is prod VPC. So this is the name of the VPC that will be created. And within that, we can pass a subnet list, like it's showcased over here. So you need to give unique names to your subnet, obviously, because creating duplicate subnet name is not permissible, as well as a proper CIDR range so that they don't overlap or they don't interject each other in any scenario. You can mention in which region you want the subnet to be created. For example, I can change this region to Asia South 1, so that one of my subnets is created in US Central 1 and one is created in Asia South 1. For the purpose of the demo, I'll just keep it to US Central 1 only, since there are other resources that I want to provision over there. Okay. Then you can mention whether a particular subnet needs to be a private subnet or a public subnet, and accordingly, you can set this value as true or false. So setting the value as true would mean that your subnet is actually a private one and can be only accessed depending upon the rules that you define for it. And lastly, whether you want the logs for the subnet to be registered in Stackdriver or not. So Stackdriver is GCP's own logging and monitoring solution where you can basically view or monitor any kind of logs that are coming in from your system that have been enabled. Okay. So yeah, so these are all the different items regarding the entire calling module and the Terraform state. Terraform variables. So we'll just apply this. Oh, okay. So that is a different kind of error. All right. Okay, let's see. So I just need to switch to networking and then go to VPC. All right. Okay. So the first thing, as I already mentioned, if you are into like playing a lot with Terraform, so you'll probably need to delete your files and it contains old data, which you probably would not need. Okay. So Terraform now is configuring backend for it, and it's downloading the provider plugins also. So just give this a moment. This usually depends upon how fast or how well your internet connection is, and it can just quickly download or take a lot of time, like it is taking now. Okay, so we have initialized. Next we do is Terraform plan. Okay, so Terraform plan will define what resources are getting created. So since we are adding only 3 resources, so one is the main VPC, and other is the 2 subnets that we have defined. So that's why to add we have only 3, and there are 0 to change or destroy. Okay. So if you can see, we have the subnet definition over here. So this is the CIDR range that we had defined, the name of the subnet that we had defined. So these are basically the variables that we had defined for a particular subnet. Okay. So create timestamp, gateway address, ID, and all of those things. Those are additional items that will be defined within the subnet itself. Okay. And then lastly, we come to the VPC. So we have a description associated with the VPC, we have the name of the VPC, and we have the routing mode, whether it's global or not. Okay, so let's do a Terraform apply over here. Okay, I'm happy with the changes, so we'll just execute those. Meanwhile, we'll just go on to the VPC console real quick so that we can probably hope to see the VPC getting created. So yeah, so you can see that there is already a default VPC. So someone might have questioned that, why I'm not using the default VPC provided by Google. The reason for that is the default VPC is something that is general information to everybody that, this is a default VPC. These are the CIDR ranges for it. So this comes auto created by Google in all the projects that we create. And some people with malicious intent might try to, get into the system using the default VPC addresses that have been provided. So this is information that is readily available to everyone. Okay, so we can see that the prod VPC is getting created with the creation mode as custom. So if you leave the creation mode to auto, so what that would do is basically create a subnet in each of the region that GCP has to offer. So since we don't want that, since we want our project only in one particular region, we should only define subnets in those regions only. Okay. Okay, let's see. So according to this, the VPC is created and it's ready to be viewed by us. Okay. Okay, so if you enter the VPC over here, alright, so you can see there are no static IPs or firewalls because we have not defined those. We'll be defining those. We have a few routes to the particular subnet that we have. There's no any kind of network pairing or anything like that. Going back to the subnets. Okay. Just a moment, guys. Is there something I missed out? Oh, maybe I need to refresh the page. Right. I guess I was seeing an older version of the page, or maybe from the cache. So you can see whatever we have defined in our variables for a particular subnet, like for the DBUSCT1 subnet, we wanted that to be a private access. We had defined that as true, so that is coming as on. Whereas for the other one, we had defined that as false, so that is coming as off. All right. So this is how you basically define an entire VPC and a subnet within your Terraform, using your Terraform for a particular Google project. Okay. So since this particular subnet has no firewall rules associated with it right now, so what we'll do is we'll go to the firewall section in networks. Okay. So coming to firewall over here, yeah, firewall rules. Okay. So how you would want to define your firewall rule is something, it would look like this. So what I've created over here is basically an internal firewall rule that would allow communication between two of my subnets, 10.2 and 10.3 that have been created right now. And the other firewall rule that I've applied is for Google IAP. So IAP is Identity Aware Proxy. It's a secure way to SSH into your machines without having to expose the SSH port 22 to 000. That's the general internet. So this is something provided by Google, which comes in really handy because you don't really have to whitelist anyone's IP in the firewall. This is just a Google provided IP that you need to whitelist, and Google will take care of how you SSH into your machine in a very secure fashion. So enabling this is one of the general practices that we follow. That's why the firewall rule has also been kept over here. Okay, so as you can see, the firewall rule actually calls on the main firewall module that we have defined. Then it takes a variable name, VPC name. Since this has been defined as a variable because you can have multiple firewall rules, so you don't want your VPC name to be getting defined again and again. So that's why this has been kept as a variable. Then you can define what is your firewall name. So a general practice that we follow is the VPC name followed by what exactly my firewall rule is supposed to be doing. So my VPC name is prod VPC. My firewall rule is supposed to allow IAP access, followed by FW to indicate it's a firewall rule. Okay. Then disabled false. Okay. So this particular variable is actually pretty handy, or a config item is pretty handy. So how this works is you can actually set it to true. So what that would do is it would create your firewall rule, but it would not apply your firewall rule on the VPC unless you manually or programmatically enable it or define it to be as false. So disable true means that you have the rule created, it's not in effect just as yet. Okay. Then you can define what protocol needs to be used. So over here it's TCP protocol for the ports 22 and 3389. If you can see the same config item over here, ports is defined as empty. So what this means is allow TCP on all of my ports. So if you leave it as empty, it would basically fetch up all of your ports. And upon proper definition, it would only allow those set of particular ports. Okay. Additionally, you can see there are two more configuration items. So this is source tag and target tag. Okay. So source tag is basically all the different tags that your source, your source may have. For example, if you are enabling communication via VPN from your AWS to GCP account, so your source tag might be like AWS VPN VMs, and your target tags could be, let's say, if you have a temporary hub or temporary item where you want to store something. So your target tag could be temporary storage or storage VM or something like that. So these rules would only get applied to those particular set of VM. Since right now we will only be creating a couple of VMs, so that's why the target tag has been left to empty. Leaving it empty means that the rule would be getting applied to all of the instances that are present in your network. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and provision these items. Oh, sorry, I just wanted to show you the Terraform TFVAS file. So over here you can see there are not many items that have been defined for Terraform TFVAS. We only have the project name, the region, and the VPC name on which the firewall rule needs to be applied. Since all of the major information is actually captured in the main.tf file only. Okay, so let me clear my screen. Okay, let's do Terraform. Okay. Okay. Terraform plan. So this would show us what what firewall is getting applied. All right, so you can see that, okay, this is my source range. The ports allowed are all, the protocol is TCP. Similarly, the ports allowed here are only 22 and 3389, which is required for SSH and RDP, and the protocol is TCP. Okay, and also you can see that this particular rule is disabled, whereas this rule is enabled. Okay, so we'll just see that on the console also again once. Let me do a Terraform apply, and we'll view those items on the console. Yes. Okay, let's check out the console once. I'll give it a refresh. Okay, the firewall rules have been applied. Okay, so you can see that we had disabled the allow IAP firewall rule. That's why we have a disable sign over here, that the firewall rule is disabled and not enforced on the network. Okay, so there are two ways to go about it. Either you can enter the firewall rule manually and edit it and change the disabled value to enabled, or the other way around that I would always prefer is changing it over here directly in your Terraform. Okay, so as soon as I change this configuration item and do a Terraform plan, so my Terraform will be able to read what kind of state change I'm trying to apply, and it would automatically display, okay, these are the changes that you want to apply. This is the resource on which the change would be applied. So you can see that there are 0 things to add. There is just one thing to change. So as I had mentioned before, whenever there is some update in place, Terraform gives a yellow tilde mentioning exactly what configuration item is supposedly getting prepped for change. So since I want to apply this rule and I don't want it disabled, that's why I'm changing disabled to be false. So once I apply this changes, the rule would actually get enabled and would take effect on my subnet. Sorry, on my VPC. Okay, so you can see that we get a modifying this time around instead of creating. Okay, still modifying. All right. Okay, so the modifications are complete. We'll just view it over here. Okay, so you can see this is still in disabled mode. I just give it a refresh, and we'll be able to see that that particular rule has now been enabled, and we'll see it on the VPC screen as well. Right, you can see that enforcement right now is showing as enabled. So okay, so we'll see it on the VPC screen as well, where the particular disabled sign would not be visible to you guys anymore. Yeah, you can see that the disabled sign has been removed in front of the name of that particular VPC. So that means that this particular VPC, this particular firewall rule is now actually applied and is actually working for all of the different instances. Okay, so coming down to instances, what we'll provision next is actually a proper working GC instance onto onto Google Cloud. So let me just get rid of all these items. All right. So now since a GCE a compute engine or a VM is essentially part of a particular region. Like we need to define exactly which region or which zone that particular VM should reside in. All right. So that's why that particular definition or module for that is defined in the regions directory. Since we're defining it in US Central 1, it's within the directory US Central 1. Okay. Then you can come down to compute. Okay. So this is the general trend that we usually follow to make individual directories for individual folders, so that you can know exactly what resources present over there, and don't get confused with the name of the folder itself. Okay, so coming down to the main.terraform. All right, so you can see there are multiple modules defined. All right, so this module is for disk policy. So what this does is creates a snapshot policy for your entire disk. Okay, this particular module is for creating the VM itself. All right, so these are the two modules that we have defined. So you can see there are multiple variables and multiple configurable items that we have defined over here, as well as multiple source modules that these particular calling modules depend on. Okay, so disk snapshot policy. So what this does is it creates a particular snapshot policy for your VM that you are going to create. So how this helps us is that whenever we are creating a VM, so instead of manually attaching a snapshot policy to it, or manually or periodically taking a snapshot of it, we just employ a policy to do that for us. Okay, so you can set the time in UTC, for example, exactly when the snapshot should be taken. You can set the retention days that, okay, after 15 days, my snapshots taken should be deleted, the older snapshots, and the location where you want to keep. So depending upon which region you are in, the location is obviously set to change. So it can be US or Asia or Europe, depending upon which region you prefer. All right. Then coming down to the actual VM. So you can define the module name with the VM name. So if you want to add another VM per se, so you just copy this entire module, you change it to demo group VM2. You change the machine name, you change the internal IP for it, and you're good to go. So those are all of the different changes that you want to introduce. Coming down to the variables. Okay. So for variables, the standard ones are project ID and region. So that has been defined in the Terraform TF file. Okay. So project ID and region. Okay. Then what is the machine type that my VM is supposedly to take? Okay. So you can define the machine type over here. So GCP offers various machine types from standard to high memory to high CPU. So depending upon your use case, you can choose the machine type that suits you the best. Okay. Next variable would be instance labels. So any kind of labels that you want to attach on a variable. For example, you have a series of instances where you want to deploy your web application, or your series of instances where you deploy your backend application. So you can label them as such, backend application or front-end application. Okay. So you can see the instance variable over here. So first is which environment it is, which group it belongs to, who is the owner or team for that particular instance, what app is running over here. So you can change this to web for the time being, and what is the version of that particular software that is deployed on that VM. Okay, so those are a few of the variables that you can define. Then you need to define exactly which which network and subnet your VPC needs to belong to. Okay, so that definition is also present over here. Okay, so your VPC name is prod VPC. Your subnet is the first subnet that we had created, and you can also associate network tags to it. So associating network tag would mean that you can uniquely identify your VM or set of VMs based upon this tag, and you can even set these tags in the firewall rule. So if you remember, in the firewall rule, we had a variable. We had a configuration item. We had a configuration item named as target tags. Okay, so the network tag you define for a VM can become a target tag that you define in the firewall rule over here. So that a particular firewall rule is only attached to that particular VM that has the network tag of the same name. Okay. Our next configurable item is internal IP. So you can choose basically what internal IPs your VM should have, so that you don't get a random one assigned. So how this works is Google actually reserves this particular IP for you, so that it is only attached to this VM and not to different VMs. Then depending upon your use case, your external IP can either be set to false or true. I'll just showcase of how we can just turn it to true, and it'll probably take a few more seconds to get provision after we've actually created the VM. Lastly, we have the boot disk information and the snapshot policy that we had created earlier. So that needs to be attached to the particular boot disk. And lastly, we have the service account. So a general practice that we usually follow is that you always need to create a custom service account because using the default one can lead to problems, because the default service account usually has a lot of permission attached to it. It's usually an editor permission that is attached to a default service account. So in the hands of a malicious user or a wrong user, it can lead to many problems that we might not be able to think of. Okay, so the service account has already been defined over here, the Terraform demo service account. Okay, so we'll move on to applying this item. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to go in the compute region. Okay, so firstly I'll come out. Okay, I'll go to regions, US Central 1, compute. Okay, then I'll go to the demo group part. All right. The next item is Terraform init, so that it can actually get initialized. Okay, so my entire modules are initialized. Let's do a Terraform plan just to show exactly what all resources are getting created. Okay, so we'll just drill down from top to the bottom. So firstly, you can see that, as I had mentioned, the internal IP that we define in the module is actually something that Google reserves. So this is the particular name that would be provided to the internal IP. So it's the VM name followed by -int-IP to showcase that, okay, this is the VM to which this IP is attached and it's an internal IP. And this is the region and the subnet where the particular IP would belong to. Next, we have the compute disk. So this is the disk that has been created. So the boot disk that has been created. So you can see that we had actually defined an Ubuntu image in our main module. So that's why we have an Ubuntu image over here. These are different labels that we had attached to it, as well as the size of the boot disk. So it was defined as 50. You can change it to whatever you like depending on the use case. Next, we have the snapshot. The boot disk snapshot policy. So this was the policy that was created earlier at the main interval. Sorry, at the start of the very file. So this policy is getting attached to this particular boot disk over here. So as we had mentioned it that simply. Then lastly, we have the actual VM instance getting created. So this would encompass all the different information that we have, such as labels attached to the particular VM, size of the VM, the name, the region it should belong to, and all of the different items. And okay, and lastly, this is creating of the snapshot policy that will be attached to the boot disk. So how Terraform works is it basically has all of the information encaptured to it. Okay, so it knows that the boot disk that it has to create, it depends upon the snapshot policy, since that snapshot policy has to be attached to the said boot disk. Okay, so what it will do, it will work in parallel. It will create the GCE VM. It will create the snapshot policy first, and then it will move on to create the boot disk, because it has to attach the policy to the boot disk. So Terraform actually works in parallel really well, and it also has an idea of how the dependency is working. So it only creates all of those resources that are not dependent on anything, and then proceeds on to create the resources that are actually dependent upon other items. So I think even if we notice, while creation, you can see the first thing that is creating is the static IP, the boot disk, and the disk policy. But the disk policy is getting created first. Only after that, the boot disk is actually it moves into a creating state properly. Okay, so it's creating multiple resources at once. We'll just go to the GCE console so that we can view it properly, or we can just view the initialization of it. Okay. All right. Okay. So the resource has been created. You can see that over here. You can just open this up and look at all the different items that we had mentioned. So my machine type has been chosen properly. The different labels that we had associated with it, the primary IP that we wanted it to come with, the boot disk that we wanted, along with the disk snapshot policy. So if I open this up in a new tab, you'll be able to see that the snapshot policy that was created is actually attached to the boot disk while the entire VM was getting provisioned. Here you can see the snapshot policy has been created. And the snapshot policy is the same that we had defined. So backup should be taken every 23 hours at UTC time 6, auto delete snapshot after 15 days of time. Okay. So one change I would like to introduce to the entire thing would be to allow the VM to have an external IP. So you can just simply change this from false to true. This would mean that your VM is actually would actually have a proper IP attached to it. Okay, so you follow the same steps. You just do a Terraform plan so that Terraform can actually showcase you what all changes it has noticed from the previous state to the new one that you want. Okay, you can see there are two changes, one to add and one to change. Okay, so the one to change is the network interface where a new where a new IP is supposedly getting attached to it, and one to add would be creating the external static external IP that is supposedly getting attached to your VM. Okay, so Terraform apply to make sure that the changes are actually applied. Okay, let's move ahead. Okay, I think we'll just move back over here. Okay, so external IP is to that one. Okay, so it's modifying our VM. It has created an external IP within 14 seconds of time, and it is modifying the current VM. So this could take up some time. So in the meanwhile, we can just go over the next resources that we are going to provision, or we can move over to some best practices in Terraform if that is something we would like, since we probably are running out of time for Q&A. So let's see. Yeah. Okay, so you can see that a new external IP has been attached to this particular VM. We'll just open it up and see it really quickly if the external IP is actually present or not. So you can see that this particular IP has been attached to your VM, and that state has been successfully stored in your GCS bucket. So I'll just showcase the GCS bucket really once, and we'll move on to the best practices that we have for Terraform. Okay, let's see. So this is a bucket that we had created. Okay, in that you can see the prod folder is there, in which multiple resources would be there. So our compute engine was actually present in regions US Central 1, right? It should be in demo, I'm guessing. Yep, and the default TF state. So you can open the TF state file. You can actually download it, and you can view that. Okay, this is what my current state looks like. So this is basically an information of your entire VM, along with all the different components that are attached to it. The boot disk, the snapshot policy on the boot disk, the internal IP, the external IP. So all of that information is viewable over here in a very in a very extensive manner, so that you can actually look or change whatever needs to be done over there. Okay, so I'll just close this screen. We'll move back to the presentation, and we'll just go over some best practices that we have. Okay, so some best practices from Terraform. So since Terraform is actually being used by multiple people, so these are the best practices that are offered directly from Terraform itself. So the best thing about it is that Terraform is modular. Okay, so just by defining a few files such as main.tf, variable.tf and all things, you can actually create a Terraform module. And how Google contributes to this is Google has its own set of sorry about that. Yeah, Google has its own set of collaboration with HashiCorp, where there are dedicated people who keep on creating Terraform modules for different items. So all of the modules that you see here for that we had planned for the demo are actually taken from these open source modules only. They have just been modified in a structural manner so that they are easy to read and more usable, basically. Okay. Then you have standardized reference architecture. So Terraform actually also shares different architectures, and like since people developing are actually people who have been in the industry for a very long time, they know how a particular concept or an item should look like. Okay. Then it also has built-in functions that can be used directly. Having said that, Terraform, like the Terraform team, the people at HashiCorp are also implementing of how you can use a for loop or how you can use a loop strategy to basically, provision multiple items as one, such as we had done in Subnet, where we provided a list of subnets and all of those were created in a proper organized fashion. Okay, the next thing is workspaces. So Terraform workspace is something, Terraform workspace is basically where you where you are working with your own Terraform code. So Workspace really comes in handy when you want to encapture your entire existing infrastructure and convert it into a Terraform into a Terraform preserved infrastructure. So that is where Workspace can come in handy. Then state storage backend. So Terraform allows you to store your TF state in a proper backend, such as GCS or S3 or wherever it is that you desire. But the great thing about storing it in a state storage backend is that actually provides a lock over it. And by providing a lock, what happens is we are safe from many people executing changes on the same state or having the state going into a corrupted file. Okay, then Terraform Enterprise is actually Terraform's enterprise model, where it provides much more higher level of support if you are working into something, if you are hoping into something like that. Apart from that, Terraform is completely open source, and there are a lot of people contributing to it. So finding a solution to a problem is not usually that hard. Then team development, right? So since we are actually creating a lot of infrastructure from using Terraform, so what you can do is you can actually divide the said infrastructure into multiple teams. Like one team can be responsible for IAMs. Okay, so if you have some IAM responsibilities, so a particular team can take care of that. Another team can work into network. Another team can work into let's say databases. Okay, and you can have test-driven or infrastructure automation. So what we mean by that is there are actually open source tools provided by Terraform, provided by third party, that actually helps you test the infrastructure code that you have written. And all of the code that is readily available is actually really well commented so that everyone can understand that. And lastly, the cloud adoption enablement. So Google and Google from itself actually provides a lot of resources for you to get started on Terraform. So if you can just go over the particular resource list, so Google actually provides how to get started with Terraform with this proper tutorial. You have workload deployment using Terraform, which is also another great blog post where you can get started. One of the major things I would like to point out is the Google Foundation Kit, which actually provides you direct Terraform templates that you can readily use. So these are some great resources that I hope we can share with you guys after the seminar. And you can just get started with Terraform, hopefully using those. So back to you, Karthik.
Thank you so much, Karan. I think it was lovely. I think you went into the detail of automating stuff right from service account to actually provisioning a VM through Terraform, right? So with that, I think we've come towards the end of this session. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in.